You're welcome to my banner. It's exactly 9 minutes after 7 here on the AM show. Now, Ghana has experienced respectable economic growth in the past few years. And this, combined with various government initiatives, has helped to cut poverty in half. But this also means that 1 in 4 people are still poor. And these people are unable to provide for their own basic needs and those of their families. So we'll talk about education, health, food. Also, 1 in 10 people are living in extreme poverty. And what that means is that the families cannot even provide enough food to eat, let alone everything else. And that's why UNICEF and indeed Ghana Connect are putting together a program that will be aired tomorrow on radio and television. We want to know a lot more about poverty and what politicians have got to do with it. Sarah Haig is Chief of Social Policy with UNICEF, and our own Evans Mensah, head of a political desk here, join you. So good morning and thanks for your time.
Morning.
Good morning.
I'll start with you, Sarah. Same thing. What has politicians got to do with poverty?
Well, UNICEF has been having a conversation with a range of different partners in Ghana, sort of supporting people to start discussing these issues around poverty. We just don't seem to talk about it in Ghana. We've made a huge amount of progress. As you just said, Ghana managed to halve the number of people living in poverty. That's incredible. But if you still have 1 in 4 people living in poverty, they can't provide for their education of their children, for schooling, basic food, it's a real issue, and it's going to become an obstacle to Ghana's own development. So we've been having these conversations and working with various partners. We're working with NDPC, the National Development Planning Commission, on Tuesday to have this big national forum on these issues. And we're very happy to be working with Multimedia and Joy News this week to be having this conversation with politicians. And I think the important point is to get the conversation going and to get people to be talking about these issues and to really find concrete things that Ghana can be doing to reduce poverty and to reduce inequality, because it's becoming a major issue for the country.
Evans, what difference will this conversation make?
A lot of difference. I mean, because if you look at it really, in the past 2 elections, we know that the issues hover around unemployment, general economy, people's livelihoods, etc. But we haven't, I guess, had a focused, research-backed conversation. What we have done in the past, essentially, to pitch camp or go to the communities and collect voices and complete politicians and get them to respond. The difference now is, thanks to research done by UNICEF and their partners, World Bank, etc., we have proper scientific data now behind what we're doing, and so we can now use that to hold the politicians to more, I guess, concrete, tangible issues based on research that you can get them to commit to. In the past, they simply dismissed them as, and as, I guess, an over-exaggeration of an issue that they believe wasn't there. Because if you are in an incumbent government, you want to paint a picture as if you play a soundbite to him, he says, well, this is not representative of everybody else in Ghana. But thanks to the research, it'll be difficult for you to say that now, because this is really scientific. So I think this is going to be a game changer in the way we hold politicians to account when it comes to issues of development, the gap between the rich and the poor, issues like agriculture, which is really at the heart of this conversation, because a lot of us are there. And that, I was reading the document. That was the thing that struck me, the irony that agriculture appears to be one of the powerful, most effective vehicles of getting people out of poverty, because a lot of us, a huge chunk of us are there, majority in fact, are there. Yet, if you look at the research again, most of the poorest workers are in agriculture. And so it would be interesting to find out what the politicians, as we go forward into the elections, their plans about transforming that sector and making it to grow.
Isn't that the problem, Sarah? Because they only tell us what we want to hear.
That's right. So I talked about this big meeting that we had on Tuesday, led by NDPC. Evans, you were there for quite a bit of the day. And we ended up having, I think, over 150 organizations, institutions from across the entire country to talk about these issues. So media were there, civil society, trade unions, farmers groups, civil society, academia. So across all of those different organizations, we were able to have this discussion about what specifically, what concretely can we do to change the situation? And based on the evidence, as Evans was saying, and the conclusion of the day was agreement. We agreed that inequality is an issue, that we can see that gap between the wealthiest people and the poorest people is getting bigger in Ghana. And we agreed on many of these issues that need to be changed. So on Friday, this event that is going to be led by Evans in the evening will be an opportunity to really put these issues concretely to all of the main parties and really sort of put them on the spot, if you like, to try and see whether the parties agree and how they're going to move these issues ahead and really change things for people.
So what's the plan? Are we going to be monitoring them with what they say tomorrow during Ghana Connect events? What's the plan?
Yes, absolutely. So what we plan to do, because we don't want this to become a talk shop and then we all go and forget about it. And the timing for me is absolutely crucial. It's coming before the parties finalize their manifestos. For me, that's important, so that you can get to influence what they actually write down in the manifestos.
Do they actually implement what is in their manifesto when they come to government?
Well, that's a bit about, I guess, the following up to ensure subsequent to the election. Because what happens, true, is after the elections, media, civil society is so exhausted with covering elections and all the conversations going on. After the elections, everybody seems to just back off. But I think with this, what will happen is after the conversation on Friday, we'll hear the commitments they'll make. UNICEF and ourselves, a report we put together definitely about what commitments they've made, and we can then track that going into 2017, because a lot of the, I guess, conclusions from yesterday and the Tuesday program was the targets were in 2017. For example, increasing the LEAP beneficiaries to
550,000 households
by 2017. And so these are issues that will play out way into 2017 after the elections that we'll need to monitor. And Friday's show will help us understand the thinking of the political parties around these targets, and then post-elections help us use those commitments to then monitor and see how you're doing.
Sarah, are these political parties privy to the findings?
Yes, we have shared everything with them, and of course they were invited to the event on Tuesday, but they have been shared the draft findings and outcomes from the event on Tuesday. They have all received those. We've had some really very senior people commit to the event on Friday. I don't know, Evans, if you want to disclose who is coming.
So we have the Nakumia, and the Nakumia is interesting. I know he's a communications director of the MPP, but he used to be the Minister for Employment back then, and it was under his watch that we had the National Youth Employment Agency then, you know, so he knows what the issues are when it comes to that. And then we have Leo Kran, a very, I guess, astute politician, former minister, very fiery character, also participating. We have Eva Loco from the PPP. We know she's a strong advocate of some of these issues, and a very eloquent politician in her own right. And we also have from the CPP represented also. So we are expecting a very interesting, compelling conversation, but one that we can use to drive the conversation going into the elections.
We stepped out to get some views of people on this particular subject of poverty. Maybe we can take a listen to it or take a watch, and then we'll come back.
To me, basically, poverty is when one doesn't have the basic needs he or she is supposed to have.
From my personal experience, I think poverty is a very deteriorating state, and it can affect you if it hasn't been taken good care of. And talking about our pockets, I think people are still not happy with the capital per income, as in the salary basis, single spine and all that. I think maybe if government reduces taxes, it will be quite a little bit favorable for citizens.
I don't feel money in my pocket, and with the education level, you can realize the private institution, the tuition is going high. The tuition is going very, very high. So I don't feel money in my pocket. With the health sector, I think there is much improvement in the health sector.
I think it has rather gotten up because First, the things that you can buy with a little money. Now, when you get it, you can't buy anything actually. And at first, when you are given maybe 100 cedis to use for 2 weeks, you can use them. You are going to even get some money. But today, when you are given 100 cedis, within 1 week, it's gone because transportation is up, feeding is up. A whole lot of things has changed.
Not all that easy because even though I'm taking salary, but because of transportation and some taxes my salary don't reach me.
That's a story of a lot of people, by the way. So what kind of significant changes are we hoping to see after Ghana connects that conversation, Sarah, with the political parties?
I think we really want to see the solid commitment to implement some of these policies that were discussed and agreed upon this week. I mean, Evans has touched on a couple already. The issue around social protection, for example. He mentioned the LEAP cash transfer program. It's a really good program. It reaches some of the most extreme poor people in very isolated parts of the country, and it's working very well, and the government has increased its coverage quite dramatically over the last few years. But it still only reaches 1 in 10 people of the people that need it. And it still often becomes sort of a politicized issue about whether you're giving people cash and how that makes you look just before the election. But it's a real issue about people's lives. And if they receive that cash, it really makes a big difference to providing for their family. So I think the idea of the conversation on Friday will be able to perhaps take some of the politics out of the discussion and really talk about the issues and get people to commit to some of these specific action plans, like in expanding the LEAP program.
When you talk about the LEAP program, there's also been criticisms about how those people who receive the monies, for instance, how can they be independent? Would you continue to give them this amount of money forever? How can they eventually begin to take care of their own families?
The beauty of the conversation on Friday will be to go beyond actual handouts. One of the conclusions that came up from the conference, for example, was that use LEAP as, I guess, the platform to also give people skills that will get them eventually to stand on their own 2 feet. But the question is, how do you do that? The political parties, do they even appreciate this conversation about it's not enough to simply say, I'm giving you money at the end of the month, without necessarily putting in place a structure that allows that person eventually to get a skill that themselves can then employ themselves and somebody else. And so it's a whole complex conversation that revolves not only about handout, but goes beyond that to say, how can a political party or a government transform this fantastic idea into one that becomes a platform for people to get employable skills. And so that's a conversation we're going to have on Friday. It's not going to be an easy one for them to say, oh yeah, we're going to increase the amount of money we give them, because we know from the conversations that alone is not enough. You need to do far more than that.
And how to get them the right skills as well, skills that people can actually use. I mean, this issue of employment often becomes very politicized as well. You talked about the youth employment scheme and actually giving jobs to young people, which is good for a while those jobs last. But after a few months or a year or so, and that temporary employment finishes, what are those young people left with? And what is going to be sustainable for them to get them into the jobs market and earn the money that they can actually use to support their own families themselves?
Do you also have an idea how we can come out of this situation?
I think we had a lot of agreement in the discussion on Tuesday about some really solid policy actions that can be implemented. And it's not to say that we're not on the right track. Ghana's been doing incredibly well. In the past 20 years or so, we've seen very positive growth. As you said, we've halved poverty, but this gap between the rich and the poor is going to become a big issue. And people on the street, this is partly what they were talking about. They don't feel the money in their pockets anymore. They're getting paid the same amount of money, but it doesn't buy what it used to, and it doesn't buy them that security anymore. So we need to talk about how we need to change the strategy, and we need to do it deliberately and come up with a solid roadmap, a solid strategy for how we're going to do that.
Do you know, for example, I reading from the research that the people talked about taxes, and they have an appreciation of where the problem really is, because it's been established from the conversation the tax regime is simply not fair enough. It's benefiting the rich and is hurting the pockets of the poor. that is what is increasing the gap that we've seen. Although that's the irony, we have poverty, and yet the gap is increasing. And I read, for example, I think what that was done by Action Aid, that the wealthiest corporations in Ghana are given so much tax rebate. Sometimes you're losing more than 2 billion, I think it was, that I read, to them, because we have to give them all these incentives. But what do we get? You know, what do we get? Because we all pay the taxes anyway. So that's sort of the equality we are talking about here. You know, how do you make the tax regime fair? Because really, that's what is taking monies out of our pockets, and it appears the money is going out of our pockets into the pockets of those who already have the money. They don't actually need it. So it's a good conversation to have with the politicians, and I'm really excited, looking forward to how they will address very complex issues such as what we're having right now.
So because you will be there, if they're not answering, okay, not necessarily answering, but if the strategies that they're coming up with is not what you know could solve the problem, what do? Make an intervention?
Well, I'm going to look very much to Evans
and
his skills.
The thing about, I mean, Mama V, you know this. I mean, when a politician is simply telling you stuff that he thinks you want to hear, I mean, you can only hold him to strict proof. At a point, you need to let it go, because you're hoping that the people who are listening and watching can see through. Your job is to, by the time you're done with them, get the people to make an informed decision as to which of the two or which of the 4 or 5 on the platform can best address a problem. But the kind of people we've invited for the show, and we're going to have a huge segment where they can interact with the audience, civil society, people who understand these issues, and so they're speaking to a national audience of millions, but in the audience are people who know the issues and will put them to that strict proof once we open the floor for people to ask questions. So they can't escape that easily. It's not going to be that easy at all. I'm pretty sure of that.
Okay. Is it strictly by invitation?
Invitations have gone up, but we really want a wide audience group. So we've particularly asked students, trade unions, market representatives to come and join us. It's on Friday. We have to be seated by 4:30, I believe, at the Best Western Hotel. But as Evan said, people can also participate on social media, on Facebook and Twitter, and we'll be trying to get a wide discussion going across the country.
So, Evans, this is going to be on radio and television at the same time?
Yes, also on hugely on social media as well, on Major Online. So we're starting seating at 4:30. Want to launch into conversation latest by 5:30. We should start it. We're going to have a lot of time to talk about the real issues, and so we want people to come in their numbers and come and interact with the politicians. Come and help make the conversation richer, because obviously people have personal experiences that will influence, I guess, the way they appreciate the issues. And so when you have that sort of blend in the audience, civil society, ordinary people, etc., you can get a bit more richer conversation than if it's just us. And so we invite everybody to come Friday, Best Western Hotel. I think it's in the airport, exactly. So just get there and let's have a good conversation with the politicians.
Sarah, is there a better example on the continent that you're hoping that Ghana could copy, if you like?
Well, Ghana is doing very well, and I think Ghana was always looked up to across the continent as a leader a few years ago, and I think it needs to retain that position and be looked up to again. I think we can be the leader across the whole continent to demonstrate how we can reduce inequality and improve the lives for the poorest people. So we need to retain that position and get it back again.
All right, we'll leave our conversation here unless there's any other thing that you want to say.
No, except that I want to see you there.
Okay, so 4:30 tomorrow, Friday, at the Best Western Hotel.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll see you there, God willing. Sarah and Evans, I'm grateful for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right. Keep watching the show. We've got a lot more here on the AM Show.